Hello there, welcome back to my painting channel. For this video I'm going to be painting a Dark Elf Blood Bowl lineman. Here is our little lineman on our painting handle and ready to go. This is quite an easy sort of paint scheme, and they've been painted in the traditional Dark Elf colours. And as always, I'm going to start with the skin, and Dark Elf tones tend to be a little bit lighter, or elves tend to be a little bit lighter on the skin tone, so we're going to start with KISLEV Flesh, because it's quite a light colour anyway. And for the skin on the Dark Elves, pretty much that's all you've got is the face, because everything else is covered over on these Blood Bowl models, whether it be with gloves or boots or anything like that. But when you do paint the face, don't forget to paint the ears as well. I find a lot of people miss those out and sort of paint those in with the same colour as the helmet, and you don't want to do that. You want to try to make sure that we get those little pointy ears painted up nice as well. So just cover the skin, nice thin down paint. It may take two layers to get it to the sort of colour that you need if you've layered it nice. So don't worry too much about that. Once that's dry, then you're going to move on and just use a Raglan Flesh Shade to cover the face and get a little bit of tone and depth into the recessed areas, into the little bumps around the mouth and in between the eyes and things like that. You'll notice with my channel that I tend not to paint eyes. That's just a personal choice. I mean, some people enjoy painting eyes, but it's such a fiddly job for something that if you're playing a game and when your models are on the board, you don't really notice. So I tend not to do eyes too often. Once your flesh shade has dried, you're going to go back to the KISLEV Flesh. And when we go back to the KISLEV Flesh, we're just going to try to pick out some of the raised up points, so like the cheekbones, the nose, the chin. You want to just make sure that we get the tips of those ears as well, so that we get the lighter colour to just show through a little. We will do another highlight on this, so this is kind of like adding a mid-tone back after we've used the shade to shade it down a little. Take your time with these little bits on the faces. They can be a little fiddly, especially on this side, just because of where the shoulder pads, the shoulder guards and things cover the face as well. But just try to take your time. Nice, as I always say, nice controlled small lines, just to make sure that we get and we pick out the very fine details. Once you've done that, we're going on to FLAYED 1 Flesh. This is a much lighter tone, so again, just trying to pick out some of the more highlighted areas. Now this seems like it's a little bit too extreme or too bright. It will dry down nicely, but we are also going to tie that back in a little anyway, so I'll show you that in a sec. So again, don't forget the ears, don't forget the eyebrows, just the top of the eye there, the nose, the chin, the cheekbones are especially important with this highlight, because it's almost as if the light is reflecting off those cheeks and those points that are standing out just there, you see. But again, take your time, don't rush. Try to enjoy this part. This is one of the more fiddly bits, doing the faces, but there we go. So like I said, we'll tie it all back in together. Once you're done there, you want to go back to using the Raglan Flesh Shade, but just have it thinned down, so like 50% shade, 50% flow improver or water, so that instead of toning the shade down so that your miniature is completely shaded again, what you're actually doing is just tying those colours together. So we're tying that lighter flesh colour and that mid-tone flesh colour together, and of course where the shade is then in the recessed points is going to shade down a little bit more, so it should give you a little bit more of a balance. Try not to leave it pool too much in between the eyes and things like that, and once it dries you'll get a good sort of light to dark tone, you know, those bits on the chin and the eye and the nose and things like that will stand out quite nicely. From there we're just going to move on to Dawnstone, which is a good mid-toned grey. Again, I've thinned this down because Dawnstone can be quite a thick colour. It actually applies to models really nicely. It's a very good mid-tone grey, this one from Citadel. So just going to do the sleeves and his trousers, leggings, all the same colour with this. So this Dawnstone, this grey, is just going to cover all of the clothed areas on our little miniature. The good thing is, with it being thinned, it doesn't matter if I go over these little straps and things like that, because we're going to darken them and paint them a different colour later anyway. So yeah, just cover all the clothing parts. Like I say, the sleeves as well is important to make sure that we get these bits done first, because those get in between and underneath the arms and things like that. It's easier to paint the grey first before we go on to painting the armour, because the armour is raised up more. Makes it easier to tone that in a little bit later. So there we go. Once our Dawnstone is dry, we're going to move on to Dryad bark. Again, thin this again just to make it flow a little bit easier. And for the Dryad bark, we're going to cover the boots, the gloves, and all of the straps as well. So you can see there's 2 straps on the back of the legs. There are some small straps around the gloves, and there's also a strap just up here on the armour. We're doing the strap before the armour, because it's easier if we make a mistake on the armour to fix the strap a little bit later anyway. So do all of those things with the Dryad bark, because that's a nice dark base. Once we've done that, we're going to move on to XEREUS purple. So this is again a mid-tone purple. As you can see, I've thinned this one quite a bit, so this one's going to take me a couple of different layers. Probably about 2 or 3 layers to get this exactly as I would like it. But we're going to cover all of the armour points. So there's a few wrist guards, there's a few foot guards, you have the shoulder pads, the helmet, and his body piece as well. So I'm going to just paint the silver parts now, which are things like the plume area of the helmet, so the horn that sticks out. There's also the edges of the armour. Now what I've put here is the Army Painter or Citadel. I've painted these with the Army Painter plate mail metal because I particularly like the Army Painter metallic paints. If you're exclusively using Citadel, then you can use LEADBELCHER, which will do a very similar sort of job. LEADBELCHER is a little bit of a dark silver, very good base tone for you to then highlight up a little bit later. So personal choice whether you'd prefer the Army Painter or Citadel. They do very, very similar things anyway. For me, like I say, I prefer using the Army Painter metallic colours. They tend to have a really nice shine to them, and they flow onto the miniature quite nice. But it is entirely personal choice. So yeah, like I say, there are a few spiky bits that we need to paint with the silver. There's also 1 or 2 little strap points here, little buckles and things like that that we could do with painting as well. The fine detail areas around the wrist guards and the shoulder pad will be good in this colour as well. As you'll see here, just trying to hit those raised points on the wrist guard. Just take your time. Just hit those raised area, which is the detail point for the silver. There we go. Another good thing with thinning your paints as well is it's easier to fix them with a small splash of water if you have made a mistake. There are also a few belt buckles that we will also cover with silver. There's 1 on either foot, and there's also 2 up on the strap across the top over the shoulder as well. There's 1 on the front and 1 on the back. Just there, you see, that's the one on the front. And again, take your time, nice controlled, easy straight lines. Just like so. There we go. So once we've got all of those base sort of coats done, I want to cover all of those areas now in a NULN oil wash from Citadel. This is a black wash, so obviously it's going to tone those grey areas together really, really well. The reason why we're going to go over the whole miniature, except for the face and the scales, it's just so that it ties those colours together. So we're going to tie those colours in, get the purples and the greys to just sit together nicely, and then when we go back over with the purple and things like that, it will stand out a lot better. It just ties those little areas together where we've got the straps painted with the DRYAD mark onto the Dawnstone. You'll notice then that when we go back, it just holds them together a bit nicer. So once that's dried, I'm going to go back and repaint the Dawnstone. Again, with this being thinned, you've got a little bit of creative license and creative control here, because you're pretty much just following the creases really. So with the trousers or the leggings, there's quite a lot of creases because of the way that the model and the miniature is posed, so it's kind of dynamic in that sense. And that's all you're going to do now, is just build the layer back up, so you're building back up to that Dawnstone. And you want to do that on the legs and also on the sleeves as well. As you see, you just want to try to leave the darker points, so the NULN oil sitting in those creases, so just sitting in the recesses. And again, like I say, you could be quite creative, because the way that the folds work, you can paint this and build this up in your own way. So you just keep building those layers, and you'll sort of find a style and find a your own creative style as you paint this. So so yeah, as you see, I just tend to build up a little, wait for that to dry, then build another layer on top, so that I know that the colour is nice and fine, nice and refreshed. The colour then is to my sort of liking for the brightness and things like that. But as you see, you can kind of leave those creased areas in a way that gives you a little bit of a sort of a sketchy style, I guess, sort of a little bit of a kind of a cartoon effect, I guess. Or you could run the brush the other way and give yourself nice straight lines. You know, it's completely up to you. You can have some serious fun and play about and do it however you feel fit. Like, you know, you can do it however you prefer. Then it's your miniature, it's your paint. You paint it however you like. So yeah, you can just see now where the NULN oil is sat in between those points. So once you've done the first layer of the grey, move on and rebuild the colour on the XEREUS purple. So again, thin down purple, so that this gives us a couple of layers and we can tone this back up. And the colour with this should pop quite nicely. Just try to hit areas of the armour that would be shining, I guess, standing out, but trying to avoid with the NULN oil and with the dark as sat. You don't want to paint over the darker points in the main recesses, because then that takes away the depth that you've built with your painting so far. So just just like this. So you're painting around, but leaving the real darker points. With the shoulder pads and the helm as well, especially, I gave those about 3 or 4 layers, but edging further out each time. So by the final layer, it was just the top of the helmet, the very tip of the armour, the shoulder piece, just so that it brightens a little bit further across to the edge. And on the other shoulder pad, as you can see, you just want to be a little bit careful of that strap. So as you see, I'm just hitting the top of the helmet, not the whole helmet. So I've just trying to build up that lighter tone just across the top. And again, just around the edges, you know, the greaves and the wrist pads as well. Again, this is something that you can just take your time with. It's all a building process, so it's not something you have to throw yourself straight at. It's something that you can just take small little brush strokes, little stage at a time, little step at a time. And as I say, it's a building process, so you build. So once you've done one layer and you're happy with that, then you build on to the next layer, and then the next layer, and so on and so on. For the next area, this is one of the more fiddly points. This does take a little bit of practice, so this one I would suggest take your time. Get yourself a nice stable body position. You know, I tend to use my hands. I lean my elbows on my desk while painting. And pretty much what we're going to do is we're going to use a very, very thin brush, and we're just going to hit the very tips and the very edges of some of those creases with Celestria grey from Citadel. This is really bright in contrast to the grey, and that's all we're doing is sort of like, I guess, kind of like pin highlighting or edge highlighting the very, very tips of the creases. And you don't have to do it for every crease. This is just, again, more creative. It's giving you the option as to which areas you really want to pop and stand out. And because these are very, very thin lines, again, when your miniature's on the table, it's just going to catch the eye, so they don't look too flat. That grey doesn't look like it's just a flat grey. It gives you just a little bit of an edge, a little bit of light. But as I say, this does take a little bit of practice. This is probably one of the most fiddly parts of painting this particular miniature. So I would recommend just take your time. Don't worry if you make a mistake. You can always go back to the DAWNSTONE and paint that back across if you're not happy with the way that some of the lines have come across. And as I say, it's your miniature. You can paint it however you like. So it gives you complete freedom and control on how you want the highlights to be, where you want them, and all things like that. As you'll see, I'm just using the very, very, very tip of the brush, and it's very, very lightly, almost on times I almost don't touch the miniature there, as I just taking very, very, very light strokes across those areas. Now for the gloves and boots on this particular paint job, I've used a JOKAERO orange from Citadel as well. This seems like such a contrast, whereas we've got a few dark colours and things like that. This appears to be too bright to begin with, but don't worry, we'll tone that down in a second. It's just to give your boots and your gloves a little bit of colour. So it's almost like saying that these are a little bit leather gloves, leather shoes, things like that. The good thing with using DRYAD markers base is you can put so many different oranges, browns, and all those different things on top of it. So when you paint your boots, your gloves, all things like that, you can actually use a lot of different colours. This is completely up to you how what kind of leather effect or how you want the leather to be on this particular model. Like I say, for myself, I've used a JOKAERO orange. which I'm going to tone down again, so it'll turn a little bit more sort of a browny orange. And that's just to give it a little bit of a colour splash, because we're using grey and a purple, they seem a little bit dark. It's just to give it a little bit of colour, something to take your eye away from the greys and the shades like that. Just take your time and build up across the fingers and across the knuckles and things like that. Some people might dry brush this. Personally, I prefer to paint across the fingers, and that's only just from a standpoint that it gives you a little bit more control, and also your paint flows onto the miniature. If you dry brush this point, might give you sort of like some harsh brush lines and brush strokes, which is what we don't want across the gloves and things like that. We want them to we want the paint to be nice and smooth. You see, I'm just taking my time, hitting in between those areas of the boots. I'm leaving the bottom of the boots as that dryad bark, because the bottom, the sole of the shoe is quite nice to stay dark. I'm just trying to hit some of the details. So on the back of the shoe, you've got a few lines and a few raised areas, so just painting those up. And then with the straps then, we're going to go to a DOOMBULL brown. This is like my favourite sort of two colours for doing like a nice leather. Is a dryad bark base with a DOOMBULL brown thin layer just on top, and this is a nice reddy brown then, so again giving you a little bit more colour to look at, so it's not just a flat brown, you've got a bit more to the colour and tone of your miniature. Also, don't forget the strap across the top, if we use our DOOMBULL brown across there as well. And again, just take your time. As you can see, I'm just gently running the tip of the brush across that strap there. And the good thing with this is the dryad bark base is doing a lot of work for you. So because this is a very thin down paint, you can see that the dryad bark is almost creating like a crease in the strap, purely because the DOOMBULL brown is thin, so it's not covering over the undertone, it's just giving it a little bit of an extra sort of boost. So like I say, we were going to tone that JOKAERO orange. We're using a Citadel AGRAX EARTHSHADE for this, and with this I'm just going around and shading just the boots and the gloves, just to tie that orange into a little bit of a brown, so that we've got a little bit more like a leather tone and a leather sort of effect to it. Just taking our time, and we're not covering the whole we are covering the whole thing, but we're just making sure that it doesn't pool too much, so the strokes of where the shade is going to sit quite nicely in between the knuckles and just in between the purple and the grey here on the sleeve as well, see? And of course with the boots, where we've spent the time then to paint the little raised areas and the little points there, the shade then is going to sit in those and just reinforce that darker tone as well in between, which is quite nice. And from there we're going to move back onto the silver tones, and again giving you a choice here. So myself using the Army Painter, this time it's a highlighted colour, so we're going to use the Shining Silver, which is a brighter tone. If you are using Citadel, or if you want to continue using Citadel, then you can use the RUNEFANG Steel on top of the LEADBELCHER that I suggested earlier. And from this then you can just gently hit the edges of the silver. Again, you know, you've got a lot of creative license here. You can leave a little bit of dark in between. You can just hit the edges if you want to. You can dry brush this across the top, which will give you sort of like a little bit of a battered silver, I guess. That would give you sort of a different tone. So for myself, I've just painted the tip nice and bright, and just around the edges of the shoulder pads as well, just so that we get a little bit of a brightness to it. And again, it'll catch your eye when it's on the tabletop. From there then we're going to use a edge highlight of a pink horror. This is highlighting just the purple, and for this I'm using a thinned down version of the pink horror so that it doesn't take over too much of the purple. And you just want to hit the raised area, so right down the middle of the foot guards, just across the very edges and the very tips of the shoulder pads. And you can also hit across the edges and the tips of the wrist guards as well. And again, with this is quite a fiddly little job, so again, just take your time. The good side with it being on that purple is, again, if you do make any little mistakes, you can go back with the purple, because we've toned that purple up a few times, so it doesn't matter if you tone it up a little bit more just around the edge, so that's great. What we're also going to hit is just the body armor, so just the body piece, just across the very tip, just across the bottom here. We're just going to run one quick sort of line of that pink horror just across either side, on both the front and back as well, just so that it gives that edge, that sort of edge effect, that kind of highlight to it as well. Just like that. So as you can see, the more that we painted, the more that this has been building up. That grey tone is looking quite nice now. Very, very simple effects. You know, we've coloured the main tone, darkened it down, lightened it back up a little, and then just hitting a few edges to just kind of make it pop a little on the desk. It's up to you how far across the edge you'd like the pink to go. So for me, probably just down to where the edge just sort of just sort of curves away, just so that we hit in the major sort of top end of the edge. And then we're moving on to the scales, onto the dragon scales themselves. So for this one, we're using a Loren Forest from Citadel, and this is a nice sort of. It's quite a light green, actually. It's quite a nice, mid-tone green. This is quite a summery colour if you're painting things like wood elves and things like that. This colour is very nice for their cloaks and those sorts of things. And the good side with this is this green being a little bit brighter, because we don't want the green to be too dark, will actually stand out really nicely off that purple. For the shade on this one, again, giving you choice, I've used an Army Painter green tone, but you could use a Citadel, you could use the BIEL-TAN green. The BIEL-TAN green is the green that you would normally use or normally associate with washing things like orc skin or green skins, you know, like goblins and things like that. Both of these will do a very similar job. It's just down to personal choice. So just fill across the scales on both the front and back, just so that we get a little bit of a darker tone in between them. Just like so. Just be careful of where you're placing your shade on these guys, or on this particular part, because we don't want this to cover or go across any of the hard work that we've done across the purple. Now once we've hit that point and we've dried, just want to go back and use a very light dry brush. Now I'm using a very small dry brush for this, purely because I don't want to dry brush over parts that I've already painted. And that's all this is. Like I normally say with dry brushing, less is more. So build up in a very low key. So build up in a very light dry brush with a small brush. You don't need to go too extreme, you don't need to go over the top. Just build up and build up, and you can go back and you can layer another dry brush on top and on top and on top. So less is more. Don't go too extreme with your dry brush straight out of the bat. Try to make sure that we keep it nice and small and in a more controlled manner then. once we've done the dry brushing with the LOREN forest, we're just going to use another light dry brush. We're going down to the going with the NURGLING green on this one, and this is a nice highlight to the LOREN forest. But again, with the dry brush, less is more, so try not to go too extreme. Try to just make sure that we're just hitting the raised points, the main raised areas. There are a few folds in the dragon scales as well, so with this one what we want to try and do is just take our time so that we build up to make it look like those folds are catching the light. And again, it's all about control, so not too extreme, just hitting the top edge here on the back as well. And you can build it up to as high as you need, or as extreme as you need. So again, take your time and just try to get it so that you get it how you would like it. And from there, we're just going to do another little fiddly job, which is just picking out on some of the teeth on those on the scales. So we're just going to pick out some of the teeth that are sticking up towards his face. Be very, very careful not to lift this too high and hit any of the hard work that we've already done. Just pick out some of those edges. I mean, they're very small, so you could go a bit more extreme and shade them and tone them. For me personally, with these, I won't. I'll just use these as a really, really sort of like highlighted light point. Again, it's just because we want that contrast between the darker areas, the black parts on the trousers, to look quite contrasting to the to the teeth and to the brighter colours. Now, with all of my miniatures, whenever I finish painting, whenever I get to the end stage, I always cover everyone in a layer of matte varnish, and there are lots of different matte varnishes out there as well. For me, at the moment, I'm currently using a VALLEJO matte varnish. It is a premium airbrush colour, and a lot of people say that it doesn't dry matte. It does, but you need to shake it a lot. Like, I mean, you need to shake it for about 2 minutes straight, and I also have a small ball inside as well, just to make sure that I mix it thoroughly. But at the moment, this is my go-to matte varnish. And it works lovely, it works great for me. And matte varnish is brilliant because not only does it protect your miniatures when you're playing games, because you're going to be picking them up, putting them down, especially in Blood Bowl, you're going to be leaning them over if they get knocked down. Matte varnish also ties those colours together as well, so it's kind of a little bit like magic in some ways, and I know that sounds really tough, but it ties those colours together lovely. And once you've covered your miniature, this is what they should look like. And they look really, really great together. It's not the hardest paint job in the world. It is a little bit fiddly on times, but once you get to that stage where you've got 5, 6, 7, 10, 12 of these miniatures together, they do really look good together. They look good on the board, but they also look good, look great on display as well. So hopefully you've learned something here today. Hopefully you've enjoyed watching another video, another one on my channel. And as always, thank you very much for watching, and enjoy your painting, guys. Thank you again.